But what has it been like watching the progression of this kid who used to bring McDonald's or Popeyes to the post-game press conference, and now he's doing things that Minnesota basketball has never seen. Garnett never did it. We've never been to this point, unless you want to go back to the 60s or 50s with the Minneapolis Lakers. What's been the rise of Ant been like for you to watch as someone who's part of the media?
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 years of his career, I didn't have credentials, so I can't speak to like the locker room stuff. But like when he came into the league, he was known as a kind of high volume, reckless shot guy that didn't have much of an outside game. He didn't have a really good handle, but his athleticism was off the charts. And when he tries hard, he's a good defender. And, you know, that 2020 draft class, I think, was, looking back on it, I mean, you're looking at the whole talk was between LaMelo Ball, James Wiseman, and Anthony Edwards. And there was no real.
I'm sorry. Could you imagine where we'd be if we drafted James Wiseman?
Oh, it would be horrible. But like, I like looking back at the pieces that like I was writing at the time, or like people were writing at the time, it was kind of like, this is just a, you know, you got a 1 in 3 chance. Maybe one of these guys will turn out to be a good starter, maybe an all-star. And the Wolves got the right guy. I mean, it's truly incredible how far this guy has come, where, you know, 3 years ago, he wasn't a very good volume 3-point shooter. Last year, he puts up the best non-Curry or Harden volume 3-point shooting season of all time. This year, he's still shooting 40% from 3, but now he has a mid-range game that is excellent. He has a post-up game that is excellent, and his handle has gotten significantly better. And then you listen to him talk where, you know, last night, I think it was Chris Hine asked him, like, you know, were you always going to go to the point or to the post in those final minutes? And Ant just goes, well, if I do an ISO, they're going to double me. If I call for a guard like switch, they're going to double me. If I call for a switch, they're going to delayed blitz me. Like, he knows everything a defense is going to do to him. Mm-hmm. And now he just picks his spots and his times, which I often on my pod say it's like the Limitless scene where like the eyeball expands and you go into the brain. And like, that's kind of what's happening for him, where he is just getting it now, where he realizes he doesn't need to score every night. He realizes where to go, where his outs are. And, you know, there's still things that he does that drive me nuts. And, you know, when you're like studying every single play that a guy does, of course, the bad ones are going to drive you more nuts than all of the good ones. Mm-hmm. But he's clearly in probably that 5th or 6th best player in the league spot, which at 25, that's, I mean, I wouldn't have predicted it 6 years ago. I don't know about you.
Like you were mentioning, Chris Hyde, in fact, that book behind you, that Ant book, reading it a little bit, you kind of understand where Ant comes from, because, you know, he grew up kind of in the bad part of Atlanta. He grew up without a dad, you know, kind of his grandma raising him a lot. And then you realize there were a lot of people in his life that kept him on the straight and narrow, or kept him in the gym, kept his head down, kept him going in the right trajectories. I'm hoping that in Minnesota, there's, like you're saying, guys like Mike Conley or Jane McDaniels or Naz Reid, kind of a bond or a friendship there where, you know, he doesn't get into bad habits, or he doesn't call out his teammates, or he's not a bad teammate or anything. It seems like throughout most of Anthony Edwards' life, there's been the right structures around him to help him succeed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, you know, especially where he came from, like finding a good AAU coach, having a really strong mother and grandmother, finding, you know, the lady whose name I'm blanking on, but that tutored him in high school, and then moving into Georgia, like having such kind of strong relationships with him, where, to be clear, like Ant's circle is incredibly small. There's still like maybe 10 people that are in Ant's circle. But then you look at what the Wolves have done since he came in, like Rudy Gobert, for whatever people want to say about Rudy Gobert, that guy is a professional. He shows up and lifts every day. He shows up and does his work. He is like always like open and honest with his teammates. He's not afraid to call people out. He takes the extra time to put in on his body and film. You go and you get that guy right away to kind of show Ant like this is what you need to do to be great. And then you throw guys like Kyle Anderson was, I think, really important for Ant. Ricky Rubio, his rookie season, you know, Ant's talked about that in the past. Mike, I think Mike and Ant have a really good relationship. Mike's locker is pretty close to Ant's, and you know, Mike's talked to me quite a bit about like during the game, his big thing is like being the guy that pulls Ant aside and like explains the coverages and what's happening so that when Ant's out there, he can process it faster. And then as weird as it sounds, like Joe Ingles is like, I don't know, the stories you hear of Joe just laying into Ant at film sessions is just, again, like this organization has really done a good job of making sure they are putting people around Ant that are going to not only like hold him accountable, but also like fast track his development, which again, I know there's a big part of the Wolves Twitter civil war of, you know, we need to trade half the team and get a star, but even like Julius, like Ant goes in at, you know, the wee hours of the morning now to start his workouts because Julius told him that's what Kobe did. So there's just these little things that have really worked out for the team.